Hey everyone, thanks for hitting the download button on another episode of Australia's longest running basketball podcast, Aussie Hoopla. Dan Boyce here, and before we jump into it, have to give a big shout out to our longtime sponsor, Ben and the team at dunk.com.au. They're a Brisbane-based crew over 20 years producing custom basketball uniforms and massive supporters of Aussie Hoopla. So if your team needs some uniforms, head to Dunk, pop your order in, and they'll be on your doorstep within 3 to 4 weeks, ready to go. What's better is if you mention that you listen to the Aussie Hoopla podcast, they'll also throw in free shipping for anyone who orders through the site. They've also got an Instagram with tons of ideas. If you're looking for some inspiration on what your jerseys could look like, head over to Instagram, type in Dunk Uniforms and you'll find them. So some great uniforms, great designs, Australian-based company, 3 to 4 weeks, free shipping. What more could you ask for, right? So head to dunk.com.au because without sponsors like Dunk, there's no way we'd be able to keep doing these podcasts. If you love Aussie Hoops and enjoy these podcasts and want to help us keep the lights on, there's 2 easy ways to do that. First, you can head over to aussiehoopla.com and there's 2 links at the top of every page. The first is buy a t-shirt button. You'll see some NBL and NBA style tees in there. Every t-shirt we sell helps cover the cost of running the site, hosting the podcast and tracking down these legends of the game for these chats, which is easier said than done, trust me. The second option is buy me a coffee. It's just a simple way to chip in a few dollars. There's no subscriptions or commitment, just a one-off contribution that goes straight back into helping us keep the podcast running, the website live, and continuing to build out our website and player database. But let's jump into things. Our guest for this episode is an NBL champion who clocked up more than 270 games over 9 seasons in the league with stints in Cairns, Melbourne, Adelaide, New Zealand, part of Melbourne's 2021 championship squad, and also won 2 gold medals with the Australian Boomers, both the 2017-2022 FIBA Asia Cup. Since retiring from the NBL, he's moved on to the next stage of his career, working with Australian Basketball Players Association and taking on the role of Director of Coaching and Pathways at Eltham Basketball. It's Mitch McCarron. Mitch, thanks for joining us on the show.
Hey, Dan, thanks for having me on.
Mate, it's good to have you back. There's been a little bit of time elapsed since we last saw you on an NBL court. Why don't you fill in the gaps for everyone listening? What have you been up to since we last saw you tearing up the NBL?
It's been a while. I think most of my time is spent obviously with my family, and then I've got 2 roles. So I'm GM of Player Relations and Engagement with the Australian Basketball Players Association, which has been great to stay tapped into the players with the NBL, WNBL, and national teams. And then, also working with Eltham in the player development space there.
And I know Jacob Holmes is the kind of the brains behind all that, but he's got a bit of a legal background there, which makes sense. I guess with you and what you're bringing to the Players Association, what's that look like?
Oh, I think, this is, it started with Jacob, from the very get-go. And, obviously he had a passion for supporting, player voice and advocating for the players within the NBL at the time. And then obviously the WNBL. And I think, he's seen it grow over time, people like himself and people like Greg O'Neill, allowed it to grow and turn into something that's been great for so many players. It obviously helped me, and that's kind of why I wanted to get involved once I finished playing, and had a really good conversation with Jacob Holmes around where we can help players and how I can tap into my relationships as well, and the voice from players and what they need in the modern day too.
You're still playing NBL 1. You're playing out there for Eltham Wildcats. Nice little game on the weekend where you took over in the final quarter, mate, which I was watching. That was cool. But I guess thinking about retirement from the NBL, is there anything that sort of surprised you about where you're at now?
No, I don't think so. Obviously hindsight's really easy. I think looking back, I was playing with niggling injuries for the last 2 to 3 years of my, professional career, I guess. So I was never really one to sit myself out, and that's not me trying to, say I'm so tough. It's not that. It's just I think you get in the mindset of if the physio doesn't rule me out, then I'm playing. And that works when you're young for a little while. And then as you start to get older or your injury is actually kind of, needs rest and recovery, I was really poor at allowing myself to get that time. One injury adds to another, and suddenly the whole right side of your body doesn't feel very good. And so I think I just got to that point where, I finished up with New Zealand and they had ended the contract halfway through, and I had to make a decision. Do I want to move again? Go play for a different team with my young family, or is that really what I want as well with my body? And ultimately, I got to the point where I was like, you know what, I think I'm pretty content with the career I've had. I've been really fortunate, more than I ever could have asked for, in terms of for professional career. So I was pretty happy to say, you know what, I probably need a break and need some time to move on and do some other things. And thankfully, that's translated to me really enjoying semi-professional basketball.
I found an interview online from back in your college days before we jumped on today. And even back then, you were talking about how you could, I guess, see yourself becoming a coach or moving into the business side of a sporting organisation. And now you're there at Altham, Director of Coaching and Pathways. I guess is this something that's been in the back of your mind for quite a while now?
Yeah, I think it's, I've always enjoyed teaching, I guess, like the on court, and obviously there's a fair bit more to the role there, but like, I've always enjoyed coaching, and I always look back at some of the coaches that I had when I was a junior, and the benefits that they gave to me, not just in instruction and skill, but also just like helping young kids understand the game and helping young kids feel comfortable around giving them some confidence to get better and continue to develop. So I definitely have always wanted to continue giving back in that space. And, we need coaches all the time. So I think that was kind of the passion stayed through. And then fortunately, I was playing at Eltham last season, and there was a role that kind of became available and a gap within the club that they said they'd like some help in. And I think the timing was just right.
Well, Director of Coaching, I'm keen to dive back through some of the stops on your career and have a look in hindsight at those opportunities from, I guess, a coaching's perspective. When you look back at Cairns, where things started for you in the NBL, I guess, how important was it being around Fearne in those early days and that turning into, well, not just the player that you became, but the coach that you're evolving into now as well?
Yeah, it's funny because I do get asked sometimes. People go, "Oh, who was the best coach you had?" And um, it's really not that simple, because you get so many people that teach you at different phases of life and help you understand things from a different perspective. Like Aaron Fearne specifically was so crucial to my development. It was, I think, going in, the expectations were laid pretty strong that you're going to have to earn opportunity and minutes. And, the intention at the time was to kind of back up Cam Glidden when I signed. And I mean, I had great respect for Cam as a player. And so I was like, yeah, that's going to be great. I'm going to learn from him. And that was kind of Fern's thing, was like, you need to learn from Cam, and that should be your mindset, to come in and learn from him. And if you get an opportunity, you go with it. And so just being around him, seeing his attention to detail, how much time and effort went into making our roster as competitive as possible. A game plan that could stick and be consistent for the group that we had, compared to some of the other rosters that were playing completely differently. And just seeing, over the 2 years that I was with him, the time investment and the care into that. And I think that's what some of the knock was on Fernie at the time, was around player relationships, and I just couldn't disagree more in terms of that. Fernie actually really did care about the people. He just wanted you to get it right because he wanted you to succeed. As I have so much time for Fernie.
Yeah, because I guess thinking about that, and because I think besides New Zealand and Perth, who obviously won championships during that period or that era, you guys were the winningest team in the NBL. So to think about, I guess, some of the main principles of those Taipans teams, or I guess you're out there running the offense all the time when you're on the court, the way that you would have to think about the offense with those Cairns squads. I don't know what comes to mind.
Um, a ton, like, attention to detail could not be emphasized more. I think Fernie was probably one of the most restrictive coaches in terms of, he will stop a scrimmage whenever he sees, that it
Anything.
needs to be adjusted. And that for some players is incredibly frustrating, because you feel like you just want to hoop. And I know you've already told me 6 times that I need to wait in the corner. Um, And then you get through the season, and again, hindsight's a wonderful thing that, you can look, you start to realize, and that moment hits you and it goes, oh yeah, I did wait in the corner and I was open because of it, and you do kind of get, the success come through. So I think I learned to appreciate the game in a different way from him. I'd come from Spain the previous year where my role was really off the ball a lot. And when I had the ball, it was kind of like, you can do not whatever, but it was essentially like, hey, go be aggressive because it's not going to be in your hands that much. Versus Cairns, where Fernie's putting the responsibility on everybody that has the ball that you need to make the right read. And when you're off the ball, you need to make the right read. And he would hold you accountable every single time. So it was really good for my growth.
Um, Hold you accountable. What's that look like? Is that just, like you said, calling an end to train, to a break in training and scrimmage so he can sort of call you out, or is it more to that?
Yeah, I think it's stopping training a lot. Again, I think, and right or wrong, it was, again, scrimmage would be stopped at any time. You'd be getting ready to go up and down, and you just hear a stop. And, it was like, you didn't wait in the corner. You didn't set that on ball up. You didn't, you didn't sprint to that screen. You didn't cut that angle right. And it's just like in the preseason, you're kind of like, man, I get it, but like, does it matter? And it does, right? And it does. And when you look back at the roster, like, we're kidding ourselves if we said we were the most talented roster in the league. We weren't. But we certainly played together. We knew what we were trying to achieve, and we're trying to maximize people's skill set. We had young guys that were trying to carve out a name for themselves. We had veterans who were at the back ends of their careers that could still contribute in a certain way. And I think, it's a credit to someone like Fearne where we can have such a successful season, and someone like Alex Loughton, who was obviously an incredible shooter scorer. How can we maximize someone like Alex Loughton? He's not going to be this up and down guy that can run with the Adelaide 36ers. So how do we turn it into our game? I just found Fearne was brilliant with that stuff.
It's interesting you bring up Lousy, because he was a guy that played, well into sort of 36, 37, close to 40 years of age. And I mean, he wasn't the best defender in the league, getting up and down the court or anything like that. But like you said, Fearne was able to maximize his strengths and hide his weaknesses. And that's really important, I guess, for a program like Cairns, where you don't have the ability to go out and splash cash and just grab, the big name free agent. You've really, I mean, back then, you're talking about 2015, 2020, like, the team's really just picking up whatever guys are left after everyone else has grabbed whatever free agents there are, right?
Yeah, I think it was, Fearne, and I'm sure other people would be able to give a bigger perspective before my time. Obviously, they had, a really successful year prior with the Scotty Wilbekin and that group. I think it's, you see the guys in our group and we're like, we can all play. You'd look at our roster and, our trainings, and, you got, Jared Weeks, who'd been at another club, and myself, who was new to the league. You had Damon Hire, who, if you played against Damo, you're like, this guy's pretty tough to stop. But how it wasn't on the radar. Our imports, I think people looked at our imports and said, not going to get it done. Guys like Nana Igwu, who, incredible dude, work his butt off for the team and will do whatever he's asked, and just all bought in. And it's like when Nana signed, I think everyone's kind of like, oh well, that'll be Kansas season. And yet, here's Nana just contributing and doing really well within the system and sacrificing for his teammates. And I think there is something to roster builds, and you got to give that credit to the Taipans. When the time came, you're trying to maximize. Nate Jaiwai was injured for a lot of the time that I was there as well, which obviously would have made a difference. So yeah, they were really good at finding a way to make the rosters work and maximize the talent that we had.
The accountability that you spoke about with Fearne and the way he conduct trainings and that type of thing, the accountability, I can see that being, like I said, like, it didn't mesh well with every player, and there was maybe some of the comment on Fearne as a coach. But does that then translate into, the players that were willing to, be open-minded, or have someone sort of dissect what they're doing with the purpose to get better, were really able to take everything on board and improve, whereas the ones that were a little bit more, I don't know what the words are, but I guess worried about how they were perceived, or worried about, just worried about, I guess, how they were being looked at from the outside, as opposed to actually internally developing their game. Was that kind of the split in terms of what players mesh well with Fernie and not, or how would you describe it?
Yeah, I don't know, and I don't want to speak for people because it's not like I've gone around and grabbed a group thought on it.
Yeah.
Um, Fernie was tough. Like Fernie was tough, and he would a lot more aligned. I don't think it's weird that he landed in college because I think everyone at the time was like he would be a good college coach. Like he wanted to hold you accountable, and I think people have a mindset sometimes coming out of college that the pro space is going to be different. And I'll manage my thing. I'm here. I'm a hired gun, whether it's an import or local, whoever it is. And Fernie wasn't that coach. Fernie was, I'm going to coach you every day, every possession. And some people don't want that, as a pro. But Fernie knew we needed that as a group. We needed that cohesion for us to win, for our roster to win. People have to be on the same page. I think it's, from my perspective, if you take some of the guys that maybe left after a year or two and people would say that they didn't succeed as much in Cairns, I'd probably argue that they still developed and still had growth, and then it broke out at other places. People like Nathan Sobey, people like Travis Trice, people like Torrey Craig. It's not that they weren't skilled and talented. It's not that they weren't, obviously Fernie identified the talent, and the club identified the talent. And whether it did work in the first year, second year, whatever it is, then they went on and they were really good players. Well, I'd probably say that they did learn some things from Fernie, or I'd like to think so. And I think most people would acknowledge that they did learn. And even if it didn't end like, a super successful season for them individually, I think it's hard to argue that Fern didn't try and make you better.
The best season for you guys or that group was 2017, when you ended up in the semi-finals against Perth, and I mean, to be honest, it came really close to winning an NBL championship with that roster and that budget, which was unheard of at the time. You guys start 0-3, but I guess settled into that Fernie defensive grinding style that you guys had. Travis Trice was, I guess, the main offensive piece that year. He's putting up 15 and 4, and like I said, you got Nate Jowai, Alex Loughton, other guys there were Stephen Way and Mark Worthington. Cam Clinton we mentioned before as well. You finished 10 and 4, and you're putting up pretty decent numbers, 7-3 and 2 assists a game. But you get into that semi-finals against Perth. You're viewed as the underdogs. You're not expected to do anything, and I mean, it fell a little bit short there behind. Well, I guess an explosive game from Bryce Cotton, 34 points in those days was a pretty big game. That changes things considerably. What do you recall about that season? And I guess now looking back through the coaching lens, anything that jumps out?
Yeah, I think the biggest one was that it was a bit of a grind early days. I was quite close with Travis Trice as the season went on and as we got to the end. And we used to have lots of conversations around Fernie and the team, and how we could play, how we could win. It was a grind early days. Preseason was hard to get everybody on the same page, I think. And then early in the year, we dropped a few, and obviously that tests you, right? Like it goes, it tests you and goes, can you bounce back from this? Do you still believe in what you're doing will find success? But we did. We had a great unit that cared about each other, played the right way, played for each other. We had a bench unit that came in and played a certain way, and I was fortunate to be a part of that. It was really fun. The Stevie Ways, the Jared Weeks, whoever came in, Alex Loughton, and we'd play a bit differently than the starters group did, but still within our system. And so that kind of gave us an edge to where we felt like we didn't drop off too much. And while the criticism of that roster would probably be that their ceiling wasn't that high, I felt like our drop off was better than most teams. So, we felt like we can really help and come on the bench and bring that energy. And it kind of just had a vibe to the group that way. And obviously the semi-final series didn't go great. We got pumped. But yeah, I thought that looking back on that year, like it was a lot of fun. That was my first year in the NBL. So yeah, I had a ton of fun.
Yeah, 91 to 69 was game one, and that's Bryce Cotton 21 points at halftime. Was pretty mind blowing, and they kind of cruised onwards from there. Game two, that I guess follows a bit of a similar pathway. But is there something that you sort of highlight or put your finger on that just created the distance between you two? I mean, you shot pretty poorly from three of 18, 15 turnovers during that as well. That's in game one. I mean, game two, sure, it gets a bit closer. You guys lose by 8, 74-66, that one. But if you were to look at, I guess, what led to those losses, I don't know, was it one thing or was it just a combination of multiple things?
I think honestly, you've got to give Perth the credit. That group knew how to play finals basketball. And, I thought we were probably prepared mentally. We knew that it was going to be a challenge. We'd had some good success against Perth. I feel like off memory, I felt like we felt confident going to that game. We played Perth in the preseason when they came to us and we'd seen them a lot and we were like, we think we can match them and stick it to them. And we found out. And that was a Perth team that, is used to winning. And when it comes to finals times, knows exactly how they're going to go about winning. And they made shots and they played well. So I don't know that it was one thing. I don't think any of us really fired individually to just, again, strike back at Perth. And then you've got Bryce shooting it like that. We know what that is. So, but they just know who they are. And you could see that, like, guys just knew this is what I do to win a finals game.
Like Bryce comes out, scores 21 at the half, 34 for the game in game one, but you guys do a pretty good offensive or defensive job on him. I think he has 9 points in the second game, but you got Casey Prather having 24, 10 and 4, and Jesse Wagstaff 20 and 5. Like it's it just seems the more I guess you stop from Perth, they just find ways to do it in other areas, right?
Yeah, and that's Trevor Gleeson team that absolutely knew who they were and what they were about, and a bunch of guys who just played the same game in, game out. So, yeah, it's hard to beat in a finals game.
Looking to replace some bathroom or kitchen cabinets? Head to gocabinets.com.au. There you can design custom flat pack cabinets accurate to the millimetre and have them delivered or pre-assembled in as little as 5 to 10 days. If you're a builder, tradie, subcontractor looking for extra work, there's a ton of guys out there using this and generating hundreds and thousands of dollars each year just from installing pre-cut cabinets. If you want to check it out, all you need to do is sign up for free at gocabinets.com.au. There's no fees, no downloads, just a way to get instant quotes on custom Australian-made cabinetry. Another long-time supporter of the podcast is Multiply Digital. If you're a service-based business looking for marketing that actually reflects who you are, talk to the team at Multiply Digital. Mark, who heads it up there, played State League for a long time, so he loves hoops, but also knows his stuff when it comes to SEO, Google Ads, or Meta Ads. They focus on clear strategies, honest communication, and long-term growth that compounds over time. Head to multiplydigital.com.au to learn more. So after that, you pack up the bags and you head over to Melbourne United. And besides, we've already sort of talked about the financial limitations of the Cairns Taipans, and Melbourne was one of the more cash-strapped teams, I guess, at the time. It must have been more than just a bigger paycheck, though. I'm sure there would have been other teams in the league offering a bit more money back then. Why did Melbourne end up being such a good fit for you?
Yeah, it was a bit of a weird one. I think it got misreported a little bit at the time. I was in Slovenia and I didn't really have any other official offers from anybody. I mean, everything went through my agent, so maybe. I don't know. I only heard what he brought to me, but I was in Slovenia, and in my head, I was going to go back to Slovenia. I was really enjoying my time there in Ljubljana. I was there for 3 months, and enjoyed it. I was in discussions with the GM and the club at the time about, next year we're try and play Euro Cup, or we'll play whatever, and this is where we see you. We're going to bring in this import, but you would play in this, and then you'd play Slovenian league. And I was like, that sounds pretty fun. So I was kind of in on that. And then United came. It was late in the season, I think. It was quite late in the Slovenian season. My agent hit me up and said, "Hey, Dean wants to have a chat to you." And so then I had a chat, and yeah, I think that kind of opened the door. I didn't really know that was an option. And then that kind of opened the door to being like, maybe there's an offer coming. And then it came, and I was like, yeah, I think that actually 3 years. And part of the sell was that, hey, look at, you've probably been playing more wing like wing forward than guard. And I know specifically at the time I was trying to get away from that,
Yeah.
and be more more towards the 1 than the 4. It's just because of injuries with Cairns, and we had Fuquan Edwin and whoever it was, Mike Carrera the second year, who were constantly injured. So I kept filling and playing minutes in the 3. And look, I wasn't going to say no. I was just happy for the opportunity, but I was also like, I don't know long term that Mitch McCarron is a 3
Yeah.
in this league. So then I went to United, and again under the expectation that I'd learn from Casper, learn from Chris, play behind some 2 elite players on a really talented team, and I just watched them. I was compete in a final series against Adelaide, which was really entertaining, and I was like, man, I'd love to be a part of that. Who wouldn't?
Yeah, and the decision around playing more guard, and I mean, you got a chance to play a lot of point guard there, which you hadn't done at Cairns. Was that driven by Boomer's aspirations, or what were some of the factors that led to you wanting to go more that direction?
Multiple factors. I think it's that I never envisioned myself being a wing forward type player. Like I always felt like I most enjoyed the game as a creator, rather than a scorer. And that's, again, it's, when I first got to United, the intention was, I believe, Casey was going to play and then got hurt. And so, oh, sorry, the first year, actually, DJ Kennedy was there, and the intention was that he would probably play 3, but then we ended up in a world where he was playing 4 for us. And so then there was some minutes available at 3. Casey, I believe, was hurt, and it was kind of like, well, what are we gonna do about this? And it was like, again, it was like, well, if we put Mitch at the 3, and I was like, I'll take the minutes on a United team 100%. So, but I also, in the back of my head, I did really want to get back to a point guard, because that for me is enjoyable, getting my teammates involved, passing the ball. I think it's a secret. I like to pass more than I like to shoot. For me, that was a bit more how I feel like I contribute to the team better. I did have national team aspirations, but I never felt like I'd ever have, the platform to say, well, this is going to be my role within a national team. It was like, hey, if you want me to come in and, foul the 5, I'll do that. Like, it was just any opportunity in the green and gold I'll take. But I definitely felt like it was more of myself being more a 1-2 area than a 3-4. So, it just kind of panned out that way. That I think in year 3, when after COVID happened, we had some chats, and we were with Dean. Well, year 2, actually, I should say, year 2, where Shea Illy came over. So the intention was for me to back up Casper more specifically. And I'd had a conversation with Dean about that, and kind of getting more reps at the 1 behind Cass. And I was like, yeah, cool, that sounds great. And then I believe that was the year that we had Casey. And then Shea Illy was available, and I remember, Dean grabbed me one morning at at the cafe in preseason, was like, it was like off season or whatever, and was like, "Hey, I know we talked about you playing more point, but Shea's available," and I was like, "Grab him." There was no more point for that year either. So then, I think towards the end of that year, we kind of had more discussions about, Mello Trimble playing off the ball a bit more. What's the balance for the group with Chris, Mello, myself, Shea, and towards the later end of that season, I started playing more point guard. And then year 3, they said they weren't going to sign an import point guard, and instead we're going to focus on, and eventually, Scotty Hobson, and then brought in Jock. So that's kind of where I landed with more of a full-time point guard role.
You said there about how bring Shea in, and that means that you weren't really playing the point guard, but you were still starting basically as the point guard. But like, you had Casper that first year, second year he shoots off, and that's kind of when you're there. So it's more that you are starting as the point guard, but ultimately playing a lot of minutes in that exact position wasn't what was happening, right?
Yeah, I think Mello would have been designated as our PG, Mello Trimble, the second year. And the intention was certainly, to involve him as much as possible in the offense, because like he was just an unbelievable scorer and playmaker.
Put up 20 and 5 that season or whatever. Yeah, it was good.
So, and like training, just like him and Chris were just, yeah. So, I think we hit a patch in the middle of the year where we kept dropping games, and it wasn't quite flowing. The offense wasn't quite flowing and it wasn't Melo's fault. It wasn't Chris's. It wasn't anyone's fault. I think it was just like, again, evaluating. We had lots of chats, and it was like, how do we? I remember feeling a bit frustrated because I felt like I was just standing in corners a lot, and I'm like, I feel like I can create for others, and we've got some guys who are really good at finishing it. So I was like, I remember we had chats with Dean, and then ended up having breakfast with Dean and Melo. And I think, we got to the point, like Melo just said, I don't care if I come off the bench, if that gives us an opportunity to maximize Chris and focus on Chris. And we don't want to take away from him, the incredible scorer and shooter that Chris is. How do we maximize him? And so credit to Melo, because he just said, well, I don't care if I don't start. And that's when I shifted to point guard. Chris was the two. And then Melo would come in, and we didn't lose much in terms of scoring, because now you've got to deal with Melo coming off the bench. So, I think that's kind of how that season landed. But yeah, I think initially the intention was me to stay in the wing.
I asked the same question before about Cairns, but I guess looking at those teams, I mean, even the third year when you guys end up winning the title, Jock comes on board and that type of thing. But to think about the, I guess the way that you're having to run the offense when you're there, or the coaching philosophies, the I guess rules among the teams over those 3 seasons, like what do you recall about what United had to do during that time period to win games?
I think if one thing that like everyone will say about Dean is he's super competitive. And our practices were built around, we had talented squads for sure. But we got after it. Like when we played like that, we wanted to emulate, and I know, this is cliche, but we really did. Like if we make practice like this level, and it's bench squad versus starters, but that game is tough. And which is where it certainly got to. Then we go into the game, and now it feels so much easier because it's like we've had this competitive hit out against each other, and it's, I've got to deal with Shaylee coming at me, and, Chris has got, I think in year 3, Sam McDaniel's, defending him and giving him a hard time. And, we just had that competitive. Joe Lawala-Chul and Jock Landale are going each other every day, and Barlow and Mason Peatling go each other. And it's just like endless. And I think year 3, we also had Scotty off the bench because it was the same conversation. Year
That's right.
2, we had not only Mello, Chris, and also Sean Long. So it was like, how do we get the ball to everyone and make sure they're all, happy and everyone's scoring and playing them? In year 3, I think Dean had the conversation to start the year to say, hey, Scotty, I think it's best if you come off the bench, and we're going to start Sam McDaniel, because then we can be a bit more defensive focused, and we can go at Chris and Jock specifically to start the game, which worked great. So then, you've got guys like Uday Baba, Scotty Hobson, Joe Lawala-Chul, Shea Ili coming off the bench, and I'm like, we don't drop at all. Like these guys, these guys are great too. Barlow. So I think just that about Dean and the group was that year. I just remember the trainings were really competitive, and Dean wouldn't have it any other way. If training wasn't at the level, he'd start talking, and he'd start challenging the team that's getting losses every game, and you guys ready today? Like you've lost 4 in a row. Like that's the practice gym for Dean. And you find a group that clicks and wants to compete, and then when you turn around on the weekend, we're all about each other. That's when you've got something good.
I've always wondered, because I mean, playing the point guard, that year that you played the majority of the time of the point guard is the year that you win the championship. I mean, sure, adding Jock to the mix was nice as well, and that was probably a big part of it.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
Most of the point guards in the NBL have always been small, athletic, import guys. And I mean, although you've got strengths that can go against them, I mean, you're generally taller and usually sort of stronger and probably better in the post than a few of those. I guess defensively, staying in front of those players and those guys being ultimately the main offensive option for a lot of those teams. I always wondered how, like, were there conversations around that? Was there a strategy around that? Like, how did you approach the fact that, for most games, the reality was that it would be tough for you to stay in front of, Bryce Cotton or Jerome Randall, whoever's out there that day?
Yeah, it was a funny one. Jerome Randall's a great example because when I was in Cairns, I remember Fearne, we're in the preseason and Jerome's just gliding by guys, and Fearne's like, can anyone guard him? It's, no, I don't think I can yet. So that was like the challenge to say, hey, if you want to play here, man, like you gotta earn it both ends. And because of our injuries on the teams, and it's unfortunate that we had our import, but our import wings kept getting hurt on the teams that I played on. Like Foucault and Edwin went home. Year one, year two, Mike Carrera was injured quite a fair bit. Then um, Casey went down
Casey
in
was out.
year,
Yeah.
year two. And it was kind of like I ended up guarding import wings more than I was import ones. And so I guess I wouldn't say, I'd say other teammates carried that burden for us, not me. But then the challenge was, I mean, I got guys around me like that third year at United defensively was so fun. Like you couldn't not try and defend because we had so many guys around you that were so good at it. It's like, if you want to play, man, you got to buy in. And so, I wasn't the quickest certainly, and laterally too, but then you've got Shaili, you've got Udai Baba, you got Sam McDaniel, you got like just these guys who you can just throw on the ball, and there's no excuse for you to not guard properly because, if you get in foul trouble, we got depth behind you. So it was just a really fun group to defend with and solve puzzles and switch and climb into people full court.
Because you mentioned Sam McDaniel before. I mean, he entered into the starting lineup. I'm pretty sure he was still development player at the time. But like I said, that gave you guys, a really nice defensive unit where you could go out that you could pair with McDaniel, and then you swap it over, and you've got like Chris and Scotty Hobson, and they're all of a sudden this this elite scoring team, and it had the best of both worlds. So yeah, I guess like a lot of people probably wondered about that at the time. And I think we talk about Dino and the stuff that he's sort of done to play a role in the success of Melbourne there, but there's not many coaches out there that would have shifted especially with that lineup and the amount of money that's being spent on some of those players to throw all that out the window and say, no, we're going to start this development player.
Yeah, it is a funny one. And I think it's also a credit to the people that sat, Mason Peatling was also a DP and started a lot. So, that's a credit to someone like Barlow who said, nah, that makes the group work better. Guy who's done everything and anything for Australia and says, no, start the DP. And then you've got Jock and Joe who are, somewhat underrated defenders, I think, in terms of rim protection, on ball screens. Like you've got these two guys behind you who are backing you. You've got Mason and Barlow who are all about, climbing in defensively, being physical. So they just earned their spot. And from a balance standpoint, it was probably like a lesson learned from the year before about what are we actually really focusing on offensively? Tick, tick, tick. We're going to defend. Offensively, who are we really targeting to start the game? And when you've got a guy like Chris, you can't not focus on that. Because if I'm the other team, I'm like, thank goodness they're not running stuff for him. So we wanted Chris and Jock to be main targets to start the game, bang. And so when you've got a guy like Mason who's going to do the hard stuff, not ask for anything, Sam McDaniel going to do the same thing, and then I'd rather pass. So, that's the perfect kind of group. And then you've got some depth off the bench, like you said, to keep the scoring up as well. So, yeah, it worked.
For listening so far, just a quick reminder while I got you here, shout out to the team at dunk.com.au. If you've got a basketball team that needs a fresh set of uniforms, you can order from these guys today. You'll have them on your doorstep within 3 to 4 weeks, and if you mention Aussie Hoopla when you purchase, you'll get free postage as well, so you'll save yourself a few dollars there, and in the process you'll be helping us put out more podcasts and NBL content exactly like this.
You've just won a championship. You're all NBL second team. I think there's some discussions there between you and Melbourne about coming back. But Adelaide enters the picture and they come in with a 3-year offer. I'm assuming that Melbourne weren't offering another 3-year deal at that stage. And I mean, if you RIP Homicide, if you listen to anything that he was saying about money making Mitch, it was all about that at the time. But looking at the move from Adelaide to Melbourne, I guess anything from that time you can share?
It was a really hard one, I remember, because the timing was awkward. The season finished so late because it ran, because of all the COVID disruptions and the delays. We didn't finish until June, late June. And so the free agency started, and I might be making this up, but I remember the free agency started like the night after the championship.
Yeah, you're probably right because we got pushed back so far. Yeah.
So I remember it, and
It was like a week after Max, anyway.
yeah,
Whatever it was. Yeah.
and like essentially you were free to talk or something like, so as soon as the game 3 finished, it was on. And I had kind of pushed back on any early talks because I think I was just so locked into the United stuff, and right or wrong, I was just like, this group is fun to play with. We're trying to win a championship, and I don't want to talk about next year. And I think then we won, and suddenly you just want to celebrate and be in that moment and be like, hey, we just did a long season, we got a championship, and now it's like, so what are you doing next? We need to know. And I think that was like a hard one for me to be like, I don't really want to talk about it, but it's also right here. And I wanted to stay in Melbourne. I loved playing with United. We were pretty happy, but obviously, they were bringing in someone pretty big time in Dellavedova the next year. So, that is professional sports. Things like this happen, and got word that was kind of something was on the horizon there, and that's why an offer wasn't really translating quite the same as I'd hoped. And Adelaide were keen with Josh Giddey moving on to the NBA. And they had a gap there that they said we need a point guard to come in, and so that's why to me the offer was the right one, and yeah, we made the move. And then when I came in, it was we had a fair few new guys. I want to say a few of the only returners were Daniel Johnson, Sunday Dech, and a majority were new after that.
This was the year Kai Sotto came in and Dusty Hannahs was there, and Keanu came in. Yeah.
Keanu came in, Todd Withers. So CJ Bruton got the head coaching role. So it was a very new group. We were all trying to get on the same page. It took us a while in the preseason, and then we had some success at the preseason tournament for whatever that means. And whether we read too much into that as a group, and then had a hard time after that for the next few rounds, I think. But yeah, it was a lot of learnings from that first year, and I felt like we had a core continuing to the next year, but
well, because Connor Henry was there, I think, when you arrived, and then you're right, CJ came in not too long after him.
Yep.
And I guess there's a lot made about that period of that Adelaide 36ers squad, in terms of, I guess, just stability there from a coaching perspective. I think at one time they were paying 3 head coaches, at one time, because there'd been so many sort of let go, and, sort of players were coming in and out. There was situations where you guys were on the news, arguing in practices and stuff like that. I guess, again, like I said, now from a director of coaching standpoint, I thought it would be really cool to have a bit of a look back and, I guess, view it from a different lens there. But Adelaide spending, a lot of money on their roster, ultimately, often finishing at the bottom of the ladder, or, nowhere near the playoffs anyway. What was going on in Adelaide at that time? Like, how would you sum it all up?
I think it's hard when you're putting a new group together in the NBL, because typically, from my experience and my memory, clubs that keep a core and then add to it in what they're missing find success consistently. Take a United, take a Chris Barlow, etc., who had been there year after year after year. Perth Wildcats, how many years did they just have a similar local roster, and they just brought in what they needed? New Zealand Breakers, like that, those groups that you just knew exactly what you were going to get. It was hard to play against, and then, they'd lose a star player and they'd go find one. Or they'd lose a shooter and they'd go find a shooter, and it wasn't about reinventing the wheel all the time. So the challenge at the 36ers, I felt like my first year, was that we were trying to understand who we were as a group. CJ, first year head coach, and also a group that's kind of been pulled together, and I don't think anyone was expecting. I think the club was intending to build from that for year 2, which they certainly did. I mean, you can't argue that the talent on the roster for year 2 wasn't there. It was a really good roster. And the first year was the same. Cam Bairstow obviously was a stud. Had some struggles with injuries as well. Daniel Johnson's still there. Looking back, would I have liked to play better? Probably, but I was also trying to, I think, work out exactly what they needed from me. It was very different. What they really needed from me was different than what United needed from me. and my ability to change my game in what they needed. And I think you look at all those factors, and it's just a new group trying to identify themselves in a tough league. That's the reality of it. Dusty Hannahs, Todd Withers trying to identify themselves as imports, and how do I put my impact on a game where it's really physical and you don't get a lot of open looks now. You don't get a catch. Once people figure you out, you figure it out. It's a small league. So, we just as a group didn't adjust super quickly.
Yeah, because I think the first year you finished 7th, the second season you finished 8th, and I like what you said about the building the team. I mean, obviously Adelaide's been there for a long time. It's not like they were an expansion team or anything like that, but I don't know. It just felt like each season it would be, oh, well, that didn't work, throw the baby out with the bathwater, whether it be, the merry-go-round of imports that were coming through. I mean, you look at Perth over the last few seasons, and I mean, they've pretty much done everything in the last couple of years, bar made the NBL Grand Final, but they've had imports come in. They may not have tore up the league like they were, I guess some fans or media would have wanted to them at the time, but they've stuck with them and they've developed them, and they've found pieces that fit around them. They've developed that core. It just seemed like, from my point of view, those Adelaide teams often was like, oh, we finished 7th, we'll, throw that out and we'll start again. And then the next year we finish 8th, throw that out, start again, rather than sort of looking at what were some of the positives around those rosters or the positives around the year and do that. And I mean, this applies to the players, the coaches, a whole range of things. I don't know. Any of that would be things you agree with, disagree with?
Yeah, I think I can't really comment on the planning. I wasn't really involved in those conversations. So obviously, like I said, the second year we were extremely talented. And so I think everyone could probably look in the mirror and say, hey, like within the organization, players, coaches, staff, whoever it was, can look in the mirror and be like, did I do what the club needed me to do to make this team work? And probably not. Like everyone could have been better. We had a lot of people who didn't play their best basketball that year, or any year. So it's a challenging one. Year 2 was probably the disappointing one, I think, the most, where it's like, hey,
because for those listening, that's the year you guys go and beat Oklahoma City in the preseason, right? Like you're in a, you're beating NBA teams. You come back, you're looking hot with a few early wins, but then I think 13-15 roughly was the record at the end of the season or something like that.
Yeah, we had we could feel the talent in the preseason for sure. And you could see when it works, we're going to be really hard to stop. Unfortunately, our floor and ceiling was miles apart. And we beat Phoenix, and that was like surreal. But then we turned around, went to OKC, and they spanked us. So it was like that trip in itself was kind of a summary of us and a bit who we were. At our highest, it's like, good luck. And at our lowest, it was like, I think anyone can beat us on any night. So we weren't consistent enough as a group, energy, execution. And, we found that throughout the season. I think the month of January, we maybe won one game. Like we dropped a lot within a period, and we sunk from being in that competitive bubble to all the way out. So, and even arriving back from the States, I think our first game was against Tasmania. I reckon we lost at home by 30. And it was a real just punch in the face. Like, we think we're good, can be good, but we're not. And this league will humble you very quickly. So yeah.
I mentioned earlier I guess the footage where the news had caught you guys arguing at practice, and one of the shots was you, I guess, calling out guys for throwing each other under the bus or snitching, I think was a word there. I guess I'm not going to ask you who you were talking about. That's just silly because that's part of basketball and it's part of being part of a team. But what sort of things can you share about what kind of led to that happening?
Yeah. Look, I like to be transparent. I was given the heads up that I wouldn't be playing, and that basically, Scott Ninnis had taken over, and that there was a list, or at least what was shared with me was that there was a list of guys who would be playing, and there was a list of guys who would no longer be playing. And so I was on the list that wouldn't be playing. I appreciated the transparent conversations that happened during that time with CJ and Scott Ninnis. I think it was an awkward period for everybody. And Ninnis was really upfront about, hey mate, like this is kind of the situation. I still need you to be a leader. I still need you to be engaged. And I need, guys like you and Sunday to help drive this thing and make something of this season where it's at right now, because it's going down a bad road. And that's, Ninnis obviously really cared about the club in general and just wanted the club to succeed and from its heyday and where it was. So, we had a really good conversation about that. And then I think in times like those where everything is really uncertain when a new coach comes in midway through the year, I think you'd ask anybody, it's not so simple. And everyone assumes that, coach goes out, coach comes in and we're good to roll now. It's just it's not how it works. Like there's a lot of reflection. There's a lot of quick planning needed. And I think it was more just my intent was really just to try and not turn on each other. And because, you get all this media commentary and you get all these opinions from the outside, and Adelaide is quite a small town, and suddenly you've got people sharing information about you that you didn't know. And so, my intention was really just, hey guys, like there's a lot going around right now, a lot around town, a lot online, a lot in the media. And this group will only be, what we get out of it is what we get out of it. So keep it in house. If you've got some problems, say it now, and say it to us to see your face, back Scotty in. And not that the group wasn't, it was just, everyone feels a bit panicked in times like those because you don't know where you sit within the team, the organization, the league. People start worrying about next year. Do I have any value? How do I look optically to other people, other coaches? And it was really just trying to engage people to say, hey, like, let's speak honestly and openly, and also just keep it here, keep it in house. And then, of course, a camera was on in the background. It got leaked. But, from my perspective, it really wasn't going at anyone individually directly. It was more just like I don't like the road we're going down now, and we're getting a bit personal over nothing. Yeah.
And I mean, a ton of it was made in the media, but ultimately there's situations or conversations or accountability moments, I guess you could call it, that happen pretty frequently within NBL teams, right?
All the time. Yeah, I think the best teams do it more than not, and everyone's got this fantasy of this team that all just gets along, and they don't have any problems, and they're just so talented and they play so well. Like the best teams deal with those right then and there. Deal with those right then and there. In my experience, the 1 year of NBL championship that I have to reflect on with United, it's not like things didn't come up. It's not like players didn't get into it. Got into it all the time. You just dealt with it there. And that was, a mature group that cares about each other deals with it there. A mature group that wants to win can, maybe get into it. And then for the rest of practice, you still play the right way. You're trying to, destroy them, but it's not dirty. It's basketball. And then practice finishes and you can walk up and wrap your arm around, give them a hug and say, hey, respect. You have to earn that. And it has to be built, and it won't be like this smooth road to get there as a group. So yeah, it happens all the time.
Would it be fair to say that it happens all the time? Good teams, bad teams go through it. I guess, yeah, I mean, side note, it was probably the record of the 36ers that season and the few before, and the coaching instabilities that cause it to be such a big issue. But they happen all the time, and it's not so much the blow-ups or, going at each other, as you sort of put it, that is, I guess, the thing that makes or breaks a team. It's how you deal with that afterwards and how you, I guess, respond or implement some of the things that was said. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really easy to get distracted on, like we're at the end of the day, like we're all, in that realm, we're all professional basketball players and we all have contracts and we all want to get another contract that's worth more. And so like no one is hiding that. I think you just find groups at times that understand it a bit earlier that, hey, winning looks better than anything else. There's nothing more attractive than a guy that's just come off a championship. And maybe he's a star. Maybe he's just really good at his role. And every club goes, man, I'd love to have that guy that just defends like that. And they won. So like it's hard to, when you don't win, you go, well, I sacrificed for what? But then when you win, man, you look so good because the team's doing their thing and individuals stand out because of it. So I do think it's like hard to kind of step away from that and step away from, for a lot of guys and girls who are doing this, it's hard to step away from, yeah, but what's in it for me? Because I'm trying to protect my career and I'm trying to, so in heightened, intense situations, where you're being challenged on performance individually as a team, it's really easy to go, well, I'm just going to worry about mine. But in reality, everyone eats, when the team succeeds.
Like I said, you're not really getting used. You're getting told that, there's a lot more bench time for you than playing time coming up by Adelaide. So you head to New Zealand the next season. And one of the things that Coach Mody Mayor said at the time was that he planned to use you more like Melbourne had, or more like, during your time in United. I was wondering, I guess, what did that mean to you in terms of hearing that? And then also in terms of the plan for the Breakers that season, what did that mean, if you can remember?
Yeah. Again, like I signed with Connor Henry, and then he eventually didn't coach, and I signed with Mody and he didn't coach. So I was like, oh damn. I think with and that's not a knock, by the way, on CJ or Cop. It was just the discussions initially with Mody was that how can I offset what Parker does, and how can we maximize Parker? And so his discussions were similar. I guess his example of United was that it was like, the Mello Trimble conversation, to be like, Mello is really good, but is he really good at running our offense, or do we want him to be really good at scoring and creating downhill? And so can someone else start the offense? And that was, I think the intention early days was to play me with Parker a fair bit at times. Not that I was expecting to play a lot, but it wouldn't just be me for Parker. Parker would start, I'd come off the bench, and then at some point in the game, we'd be putting Parker in the 2. And saying, you initiate actions and let Parker finish it for us because he's really good at it. So that was kind of the sell to say, hey, I saw you do that with United. I saw you get, Chris involved, or I saw you get, whoever involved, and that's what I want from you here. So I think he understood how I really wanted to enjoy playing the game the most, and how I could maybe help guys like Parker and that team succeed as well.
When do you think you were playing your best basketball? Like, I mean, like I said, you've won you've won NBL championships, you've beaten Phoenix Suns, you've beaten NBA teams. When do you think that you were playing your best basketball, though, as an individual, though?
Yeah, it's hard to say. The championship year at United, and maybe it's just, I'm a little bit biased because we won. And it's really not about the fact that I was, a designated point guard and I started, because you could have started Shea and it would have been the same. Like I always genuinely felt that Shea was so talented and so crucial for our team. I played a lot with Jock. Shea played a lot with Joe. And his connection with Joe was crucial for us. So I felt like that year was really fun. It was the role that I think I wanted, in that I can score, but I'm not jacking up a ton of shots. I can score when needed, or when I'm open, I need to be able to make a shot, whatever it is. But really, like, the involvement of getting people in the game, coming out of on balls and trying to be a creator, playing in transition with guys that are running a lane or are trailing big, and messing around with when I hit the trailer, when I deviate. Like, that's a fun way to play for me. And so probably that year. I also had a lot of fun in Slovenia. It was really different. But I went from, that was kind of my first stint in the point guard role professionally, because I actually played PG for Olympia. And I remember a conversation vividly with one of the players over there, because obviously they're used to a certain type of, point guard and how they play. And one of the shooting guards, Rocco, was like, oh, have you played point guard before? And I was like, yeah, I did in college, and, a bit in juniors, whatever. And he was like, oh, you don't play like point guard. And I was like, I don't know if that's meant to take offense to that, or like, cause I'm not playing like a typical European, point guard. But I think by the end of the year, like I just found my flow with that team, very set heavy. Principles were different, drastically different to Fearne. And I liked playing for Fearne. It was just so different. And it was like, there's kick ahead pass, and in Australia it's like kick ahead pass, someone's open, we kick it, and now it's their job to make the read. At the time in Olympia, it was like if you kick it ahead and he makes the mistake, that's your fault because you shouldn't have. Just a different mindset of like a point guard's responsibility. It will always come back to you, and it's your fault if it doesn't work. So that was a responsibility that I really enjoyed for that group because it was another talented group, and it was just different running these sets of like that I've never ran before.
Was it easier playing point guard in Europe than in the NBL? I mean, we hear a lot about how it's a lot more, it's slower, it's more structured. But I mean, not you're only in Slovenia and Spain, but so it's a small data set compared to your NBL time. But what can you share on that?
Yeah, didn't play any in Spain. I played 3, played off the ball. Really was just like a corner cutter slasher. The Slovenia, it was really physical. Really physical, and you just got to get used to guys kind of fouling, and that was another difference in that. When you'd go to get in transition, that the whole Euro foul rule hadn't really been brought in yet. So we were still in the era of like as soon as you start a fast break, it's just someone jumping in front of you and grabbing you. And so that was different to the NBL that was still really fast, and we didn't really Euro foul like that. So fast breaks, kick aheads, that was a fun way to play. And whereas in Slovenia, it's really hard to get a fast break because as soon as you get a D-board, when someone's not there, they just rush over to grab you. So everything is a grind. Everything is a process. Everything is a execute. We want the ball going here. We don't look at that option until we go here. Whereas the NBL was kind of in that phase of everyone was running variants of like flow and motion where it's like catch, make a read, pass, catch, make a read. Whereas over there, it was like, you're not making a read, mate. You're getting the ball over there to that person and you don't do anything else. So yeah, it was just different. I think it was hard to adjust in some ways in terms of that responsibility because it's so embedded in an Australian junior basketball player that when someone's open, you give the ball up. And to go over there and I feel like I'm doing the right thing, reversing it to a guy, and then he turns it over and the coach is running at me. And he's like, why would you give him the ball? Like, why would you do that? I'm like, because I'm getting pressured and he's open. It doesn't matter. Your job. It was a hard adjustment because it's like rewiring everything you've been taught. But by the end of it, I loved it. That responsibility of just, it feels really good when it works, and that that you played a massive part in that. So I think it was really hard. The challenge in Australia was that, like you were talking about before, you're playing these import point guards that are just coming at you, and they're fast, they're skilled, they can shoot, they're strong, and it's just like that's a challenge every night. So it's a different level of challenge, I guess.
Well, maybe to sort of wrap things up, a couple of I guess bigger questions there. Thinking about I guess the journey and everything you've gone through, the teams you've played for. If you were to look back and pick out the hardest moment or the hardest thing that you had to overcome through all that, like what comes to mind with that?
Probably the transition in Adelaide was a tough one. I felt really frustrated. I keep saying again, like in hindsight, it's easy to look back and go, well, you should have just done that differently. I felt like I could contribute more. I'm sure that's not news to anyone. The expectations were that, come in, dominate, be an MVP candidate. That was the expectation set. And I never really thought of myself in that light as a player. Like I know I got second team the year before, but that was just because we were really good. Like I didn't really feel like that's just, oh, well, Mitch is, generally one of the best players in the league. And my agent would have killed me for saying that at the time, but I that's not how I thought about myself. I genuinely always thought about myself as a role player. I have fun when we're winning and the ball's popping around, and I get to just create and play and hoop. And I think the expectation in Adelaide was obviously very different. And, looking back, I kind of struggled to adjust that. I needed to shoot more. I needed to be more selfish. I needed to, wave other people off and say, no, come and screen for me. I needed to do that stuff more and be comfortable with shooting 20 plus times on some of those teams, especially year one. and I wasn't comfortable with doing that, and I had a really hard time adjusting to that. So I think that was a hard one. By the time you get to year 3, and suddenly you're being told that you're not going to play at all, you do like that's
MVP year 1, and then you're not being played at all. Year 3 is a big jump, isn't it?
yeah, and that's like you do have to look at yourself and go, fair enough, and how am I going to act in that? Am I going to blow up? Am I going to walk away? Am I going to get behind the guys that are playing? And I think I handled that the right way. Again, Adelaide's a small town. It's really easy, and people are pretty quick to criticize at times when things aren't working. They're right behind you when things are working. But I think those were hard years with the Sixers because people had high expectations, and as they should have. We had some really talented rosters, but it wasn't translating into wins, and people wanted wins, and you could feel that in the years after, when they started getting some wins, and now they're making a final series with Bryce. Like, that place is just rocking. So yeah, that was probably the hardest period.
8 NBL games, a whole lot on the resume and in the history books. If you were to look at, I guess, doing something differently, whether it be to extend the career or to maximize some opportunities that you had on the court, I don't know, whatever it might be. But if you were to go back and you were forced to change something or do something different, we talked about it a little bit then, what would that be? What would that look like?
Yeah, it's really easy to say in hindsight again, because I probably wouldn't have listened to myself even if I gave this advice. So it's to not play, to sit out and not play an off season and rest, recover, build for the next season. I think I just got in this mindset that I want to play as much as I can while I can. And niggle injury, I'll deal with it. It'll get better. And for a while it did, and then it kind of didn't. And so that's where, training just became, towards the end of my time in Adelaide and in New Zealand. Then when I had the PCL rupture, I got to a point where with the Breakers where I was like, hey, I'm in a really good place. I feel really good. I think we played the Blitz on the Gold Coast and I felt really good. And I was like, I'm getting back to myself. I feel good. And then we get back from America and my PCL goes. And so from that perspective, I think just being able to tell, look back and say, do I need to play in the off season NBL 1? But then I would turn around and argue. I had an incredibly fun year with West Adelaide. We ended up winning the championship, elite group, great club. So would I take that back? No, I wouldn't, because I had a great year and I got to play with Lockie Ulbrich and Anthony Drumick and, all these guys. So I wouldn't listen to myself anyway, but that would probably be the advice that, taking a break can really help between seasons.
There might have been a couple of games middle of the career that could have been subbed out or something.
Yeah.
Well,
sure.
Mitch, it's been awesome to go through that. Like I said, really excited about you being up there running things at Eltham. Like, it's outside pro basketball. It's one of the premier gigs you can get in Australia, really. So excited to see you running around that association and making a difference there. All the stuff you're doing with the Players Association sounds exciting too, and glad to hear you making a big impact there. Thanks for making time for us. It's a privilege to hear you go through some of that, and best of luck with the rest of the NBL 1 season.
No, thank you, Dan. Appreciate the time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Aussie Hoopla. I hope you enjoyed the show. No doubt you heard me mention a few businesses who help us to cover the cost it takes to produce these episodes. Without joking at all, it probably costs us around $100 an episode. Not to mention the time it takes to sit down and do these interviews and edit them all together. So if you enjoyed this episode, there is a few ways you can help. The best way is simple. Tell someone in your life that this is the best basketball podcast you've ever heard. Then head over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leave us a rating and a review. It really does make a difference. If you'd like to go further, follow us on our social media at Aussie Hoopla. Or if you visit AussieHoopla.com, you can check out our online store, which has plenty of cool tees, heaps of them Aussie basketball related, and every piece of clothing that sells generates around $5 to $10 back our way. So that really helps us to put these podcasts out regularly as well. And if you want to hear more of these, obviously the more of you that do any of these things will allow us to spend more time recording, producing, and getting these podcasts out into the world for you all to hear. There's another way to help out. If you want to be part of the team, we'd love that as well. In the past, we've had people join and write articles, features, edit audio. Some do different graphics or post updates on social media. Whatever you're interested in, there's room for you to be a part of the team at Aussie Hoopla. A bunch of people have Hoopla as a launching pad to end up working with NBL clubs. And so if you're hungry to get a foot in the door, reach out to us on social media. We'd love to try and feature you on our website, podcast, or wherever your skill sets fit into. Of course, if you have a business yourself or a product service that fits our audience, we reach around 25,000 Hoops Tragics each month, most of them in the core demo, male 25 to 55, so it's a great way to get what you're doing out in front of real fans and real decision makers. If this is the first episode that you've listened to, dive into our back catalogue. We've chatted with pretty much every big name in Aussie hoops you can think of. Andrew Bogut, Luke Longley, Andrew Gaze, Matthew Dellavedova, Shane Hill, Leroy Loggins, Ricky Grace, Mark Bradkey, the list goes on. And you'll find these episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Not to mention all the great information at AussieHoopla.com, where you can find profiles of every single player to have ever played a minute in the NBL, full with NBA, European, college statistics, FIBA statistics, anything that we could find. We've added these to their profiles, so it's all in one spot. And you won't find a more comprehensive set of information on any of these players anywhere else on the net. But that's it for me. If you've got any thoughts or feedback, again, hit me up on social media, type in Aussie Hoopla, you'll find us everywhere. And finally, be sure to keep hooping, support the NBL, and continue to listen to Aussie Hoopla.